What's up, warriors, Cheat Codes listeners? I'm Patrick, one of the producers of Cheat Codes, and it's with a heavy heart that I'm reintroducing this episode of Cheat Codes that you're about to hear. On Friday, October 29th, the Sickle Cell Disease Association of America shared the following information. It is with heavy hearts that we share the passing of Hertz Nazaire, who passed away early this morning at the age of 48. Hertz was a renowned artist and author who used his painting skills to raise awareness for sickle cell disease. We are deeply saddened to hear of the passing of Hertz Nazaire, who touched so many lives with his art, says Beverly Francis Gibson, Sickle Cell Disease Association of America President and CEO. This is a huge loss for the sickle cell disease community. Cheat Code's co-creator and co-host, Dr. Amar Zaidi, had this to say on social media. My friend and original inspiration to be a better sickle cell doctor came from one conversation with Hertz. I had seen his art countless times, but it was his words that changed me. We had many conversations over the past few years. We will never recover from this loss, and he has certainly left us all better than he found us. Last December, Hertz joined Amar on episode 24 of Cheat Codes for what remains one of my personal favorite podcast episodes I've ever had a hand in producing. As I came to learn, Hertz's very use of words and way of communicating was art. Hertz, the man, was art. Dr. Z, like many in the sickle cell community, is hurting and processing what this tremendous loss means. We spoke earlier this week about re-releasing his interview with Hertz from here on Cheat Codes to share Hertz, in his own words, with anyone who may have missed the interview the first time around or who just needs to hear from Hertz one last time. It's my honor to present this Cheat Codes interview of Hertz Nazaire, led by Dr. Amar Zaidi, which originally aired here on Cheat Codes in December of 2020. Enjoy it, and if you're moved and compelled to do so, there's a link in the program notes for where you can go to donate to the fund that will help bring Hertz to his final resting place. Thanks for listening. Here's Hertz.
Warriors, I am humbled and honored today because the guest that we have literally requires no introduction. He is somebody who you are familiar with. It is somebody who you have seen over and over. His work is everywhere. His fingerprints are all over sickle cell disease. In fact, he even recently contributed to Lancet Hematology. He recently contributed to a new sickle cell textbook. I mean, this warrior is one of my biggest inspirations. I was lucky enough to have a conversation with Hertz Nazaire a year and a half ago. In that conversation, which he let me record as I was preparing for my TED Talk, that is a conversation that, it's really powered me over the last 18 months. I draw inspiration from that conversation to this day. And I thought, how wonderful would it be to get Hertz on this platform to talk a little bit about his journey with sickle cell disease. We have Hertz Nazaire. Hertz, welcome to Cheat Codes, a sickle cell podcast.
Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate the work that you have been doing, so it's an honor to be able to hang out.
Yeah, we're that's exactly what we're doing, man. We're just hanging out today. We're just gonna talk and dive into it a little bit, man. I've got to say the first thing that has ever happened to me that was a Hertz Nazaire thing was my colleague gave me a clock that had 10 redefined on it. And I was like, where is this picture from? What happened here? And that's how I first saw your work. And of course, as my time went on, as I got more familiar with sickle cell disease, your work is everywhere. 10 redefined and all of your various depictions of sickle cell disease are almost used. I'm comfortable saying in 90% of the sickle cell presentations that are given, I see your work. But Hertz, what I want to do is I want to spend time. People know about your current work. But I want to spend some time diving into who Hertz Nazaire is. You know, we all know you superficially, but who are you, man? I mean, let's start with the story of where you were born.
I was born in Port-au-Prince, Haiti. I grew up there for about 8 years or so. And then my mom left when I was, really small. I didn't really know her. So she spent like 7 years in the United States in New York. Then I came to join her. It was a struggle because I didn't really know who my mom was, and I needed to find a way to communicate. I was really a shy kid. So the only way I could communicate was drawing her stuff. And that's how the art stuff got started, because I used it as a means to communicate with my mom. That's when anything that I felt like it was my emotions or my feelings, that's how I communicated. So it ended up sickle cell being part of that later on, but that's how arts got started for me. But it's always been New York area, Connecticut. Part of the story is that I lost my mom when I was, before I turned 13 or so. I became a ward of the state. So things kind of like, went downhill from there, dealing with sickle cell and dealing with life and losing a parent.
How old were you at that time, Hertz?
Sometimes my mind doesn't do the math right, because it's like I remember those times when I was younger, when my mom was still around. She was the one who was taking care of me. So I didn't really, it was before my 13th birthday. It was in August. But I remember those moments. My mom was told by doctors that I wasn't going to make it. And it was kind of like a shock that I'm the one who lost my mom instead of she's losing me. She was always worried about that. I remember one day that I stayed in my room. I was always in my room. Instead of drawing, I was like trying to count the years. I remember writing down 1988, 1989, 1990. I kept ticking up these things until I turned 18, and I stopped, because that's what the number was, at the time. They were telling you that, you're not going to survive this thing. And it's like, it was always in the back of my mind how deadly this disease was, because that's what I was told. Death wasn't really serious until I saw my mom dying in front of me, and I was, in a car crash, and it became real, and I survived, but it became something to fight, to say, I'm not gonna allow this disease to take me out, because I can see how fragile life was, how you can lose a person that you care about so much. And I just kept fighting.
I mean, I'm thankful that you did, man, because like I said, this is more than your survival from sickle cell disease. You're actually inspiring a whole community of people. So your presence is very much needed, and I'm really happy that you pushed on and you fought. And
Yeah, I mean, over the years, I've noticed how my art impacted people in many ways, but it's just like I just kind of try to remind people that I'm going through the same things they're going through. I get annoyed by the same things, I get kicked out of hospitals, I go through the same kind of deals that they struggle with, paying rent, things like that. So it's just been a process of understanding that we all have gifts that we can give to back to this community, and we all have a certain amount of responsibility and accountability that we should carry as patients when we are sick. Because sometimes, even now, when I'm not feeling very good mentally, like if I'm a little depressed or stressed, I might not make my next appointment because I know that I'm not centered, like mindful. I'm mindful that I'm not centered in a way that I know that I'm going to give these people some attitude. You know what I mean? And they don't deserve that. They're like real good people at UConn where I go. And it's like, I know that I can't give these folks this attitude because they saved my life so many times. I've noticed that in our community that, we are just human beings. And sometimes patients, they're not all advocates. They're just human beings. Sometimes they're not trained to be centered or, you know, go through the process I've gone through. Because I've gone through the process because I realized that every time I go to the hospital, every time I go to this new place, I'm leaving behind a memory, a fragment of my behavior. they take that and run with it. So if I'm kind, I'm hoping they're gonna be kind to the next warrior that comes behind me. But if I'm, giving them a lot of trouble, I feel like, man, I'm going to cause a lot of trouble for the next warrior that comes behind me. And so I carry a lot of responsibility when I go there, but it shouldn't be only on the patients. It should be on the people who are actually trained to deal with people in pain.
Yeah, no, we talk about this a lot amongst ourselves too, that, when people have a bad experience with a doctor, the doctor's having a bad day, they're being a jerk that day, or they're arrogant, or some of them are just not very nice. That leaves a memory too, and that leaves a mark, and that makes the next interaction with that patient that much harder, or maybe that patient doesn't come in to see us. So
Yeah, it's difficult for me. I find that my relationship and how I follow up with a doctor, if they're going to provide me with something new, like I'm having trouble with my eye doctors recently. It's just like I've had this new eye doctor. I go to see him and he seems like a cool guy. Everything about him seems really cool. And he's like, yeah, I've seen some sicklers. And as soon as he said that word, it's like, oh my God, man. He doesn't know how much I struggled with that word. It's like when I was in the Bronx, they used to call me that word so many times, and I felt like getting off the gurney and wanting to fight because I hate that word. In the South, they accept that, many of the warriors accept that word, and people carry it around like a banner. And it's like, they don't know the kind of history I had, how painful that word felt to me.
You told me that. You said that's the biggest slur somebody could say to you.
Yeah, it is, because it's not just the word being the word. It's just the way I've seen the faces of the people who use it, the memory of the bad times that I've had, the people that have used it. I've had some real bad times with those folks. And it's like, it carries that weight. Those are the type of things that causes you to have a negative relationship with somebody who's going to provide you care. Like I have real eye troubles and I need to go back to see that eye doctor. But I've been just like, let me just take care of my mental health. I don't want to hear that word again. You know what I mean? Those type of things, little things like that make a big difference. But a lot of people don't know how impactful that can be. But if you're an advocate and you get on stage and you say that word, the people in the crowd are going to, oh, he said it, she said it, so it must be okay. So I felt like for 20 years of fighting that word, and to find out today I'm still fighting that word, it's kind of disheartening. You know what I mean? So sometimes you get to that point. So if it's like a time capsule, it's like looking back and like, I started back then fighting that word, and I'm still fighting that word now. And I'm hoping that we can get to a point that we can all understand each other and these kind of issues don't repeat as much.
we're always fighting that, not just the word sickler, but just the whole concept. Because I think what it is it's just putting everybody in a box, right? So it's not Mr. Nazaire in room 10 who's having pain today and we need to figure out what's going on. It's sickler with pain is in room 10. Like everybody's the same. It's all one big box that you can throw people in. And so, the word is one thing, but the mindset is the problem. I mean, I don't know how we change the mindset.
That's the problem I have with the word, is because that if you had a negative encounter with a patient, then you just label that patient sicker. You just carry that word to the next one and the next one and the next one. And you don't really think about their temperament or their personality. You don't think of them as human beings. You just keep thinking of them as these patients, because then they're not people and there's no differences. I'm different from the next guy. I'm not perfect, but I feel like I've earned to be a unique person. I've done the work in myself to be a unique person, to express myself in a unique way. Everybody has some bad days, but we all can be kind to each other. We all can be civil to each other. We live in a country that's a political mess right now. But it's been like that for the sickle cell community for a long, long time. It's been a distrustful, torn apart kind of civil war going on between the people who are sick and the people who provide the care. It shouldn't be that way. So I always felt like I'm always gonna try to be an advocate, and I'm always gonna try to be on the side of the science. where it sits and what the facts are, so I can just continue to be, a partner to those people who are trying to give us care, because I know I've gone through some bad experiences, but I don't see the doctors as enemies, because I see these are the folks that we need when we are sick.
I think the point that you made, Hertz, though, about, as someone with sickle cell disease, you feel like you leave a fragment of memory with your experience. I think that's true of doctors too, right? The responsibility is on us as well, because those experiences that we create, the negative ones, they stick with you. You're going to take that with you to the next appointment.
Yeah, sometimes you do that, and it's like, that's the thing, that you have to be mindful and aware that that's the case for you to be able to defeat that. Like I said, sometimes I can't go to my next appointment because I know I'm not centered. Being centered is meaning that I have to let go of some bad experiences. I have to let go of some certain things that I'm feeling, that I need to let go of. There's certain triggers. Like if there's I go to an appointment, but there's a new person there. I remember giving this kind new nurse such a hard time because she had to go through this process. She's nervous, she's new, and she's going through my chart. So she's asking me all these questions that the regular staff would not ask. But those are questions about my medical history. And they bring up such gross memories of being in the ICU and going through some trauma. And it brings back this PTSD type, a feeling where you feel like, oh my God, I'm overwhelmed by this past, So certain things can trigger a person to have a negative time. And we don't really address a lot of those anxieties and emotions enough sometimes, because we just think people are just being mean or being negative because they're just negative people, but they're not. They're just gone through a lot of suffering and a lot of pain, and they're not able to address it or at least even see it. Some people don't even want to see that they're depressed. Some people don't really want to see that they're angry. You got to know you're angry before you can get better. I'm a very angry person.
But that's true of doctors too, man. Doctors are not always centered. We approach situations sometimes. We come into situations hot sometimes, right? And I think that that's a really good point. That's a learning point for all of us, is that you really to center yourself. And if you're not centered, don't engage with the patient if you're not centered. That's a really good learning point.
Yeah, I think one of the points that patients need to see on that side of it is that doctors have to see so many patients. They have to see so many of us. And if they have one patient they care about and they're human beings, and they go through these experiences where these patients are sick, they're suffering, they might lose a patient here, but they cared about this patient. And they had this emotional attachment. So now they detach themselves because they felt hurt, because they went through that experience. So some of those folks, man, after years and years, you wonder if they're not going to become robots or just, people without feelings, because they're going through certain things that not normal people go through. Normal people don't go through that. Every day you go to work, you're seeing 5 to 20, very sick people who are suffering, and you're hoping to help them. And sometimes you lose one or two. And sometimes we're not thinking about that. And those are the type of relationships I would like to inspire people to have, is to understand that we are all going through these experiences. That's why I create art, because art is something that's just, it's not words, it's just feelings, It brings feelings out in people. People relate to these tears that I have on these paintings and these other things of drowning. It's because they're going through the same thing I went through. And that's what I feel like, they attach themselves to.
The best art puts you in a feeling, and probably you're sharing a feeling with other people who are seeing that. Or if it's music, you hear a song and it's like, it can make you happy or it can make you sad, or, you get that same feeling that other people are sharing with you and that the artist was trying to share with you. You mentioned that you started art to be able to communicate with your mom. how did it progress from there? Was it all about communication, or was it an outlet for frustrations, or?
Just something I just continued to do. It's just that it became a way to cope or a way to remember the process, and everything about art just felt right to me. Going to high school and being able to take art classes and being able to be really good at it was something I took pride in. So it's just to be able to come into a class and you're having still lives or you're having somebody pose and you'll be able to draw it. It was something I took pride in. That's until I lost my vision with sickle cell, and I'm like, I have to figure out other ways to create my art. So now I'm more experimental with my work because I'm not really able to see what I want to draw anymore the way I used to. So now I'm more experimental, but before it was something I just really loved, you know loved doing, and an escape really.
Was there a moment when you went from I like to paint, I like to do art, to I'm an artist. This is my calling. This is what I'm going to do with my life.
It really never came to that. There's this thing where I looked at the art world and I was like, you know what? After I created the sickle cell series and they took off, people who I grew up around, they started to talk to me about what art is. They were interested in art. They became artists for themselves. They moved to New York saying, this is the place you make it at. And they started selling art for the money or for the, as a to make a living at it. For me, it never came to that. For me, it was like if I wasn't sick, if I didn't have sickle cell, I probably would be doing something else with my life because I love science. I love a lot of other things. I love languages. Probably would be traveling the world or learning some other language or living somewhere else completely. But for me, with sickle cell, communicating the pain is and going through the issues I went through, it just became something that could get me out of the situations I'm in. My art got me out of the streets when I was homeless. Like I used my portfolio to get into a building that was specially made for artists. That's where I'm now. You know, every time I've got into trouble, my art opened the door for me to get out of the issue that I'm having. So it was always a tool that I used to continue to cope with life. It never was a thing that helped me like make a living at. It was never that. So it's still never really that to me. But to me, the most important part of it is knowing that if someone sees my work and they have this disease or they haven't gone through something similar, if it inspires them to think about life or think about what they've gone through and continue to fight it, then I'm glad, that I was able to create that.
One thing that I think you underestimate, Hertz, is the way you speak about sickle cell disease. I remember the first time I heard you speak was at that priapism town hall with Dr. Burry and Dr. Drew in Fort Lauderdale. I don't know if you remember that. Honestly, the way you speak about sickle cell disease is art in itself. It is really refreshing. But I have a question for you. You inspire a lot of us. But let me ask you this: what inspires you?
Mostly, even when we go through all these tough times, I get inspired by science and innovation. Like I spend a lot of hours looking at what SpaceX is building down in Boca Chica. I have videos over videos. I watch all these videos.
You
They
watched the
build.
launch the other day?
Yeah, I saw the launch. I was watching the whole thing. I didn't even sleep. I just stayed up watching all that. So yeah, I'm inspired by pioneers, people who break barriers, people who build new stuff, people who speak new languages. Everything is a language to me. It's like, looking at doing something new and something that has nothing to do with politics, nothing to do with health, nothing to do with all that kind of stuff. It's just something different. I like looking at those type of things. Those things inspire me to continue. Like, if you're having a bad day, like I'm having a bad day, or I'm feeling bad, and I've had some tough times this year, and it's like you just want to be inspired to continue, to keep pushing and keep going. So I just want to see the next launch. I want to see this thing be successful. I just want to see this other thing. And sometimes I just watch videos about Japan because I want to get there someday. I want to go and I want to, walk around and just look at this place. So those type of things inspire me to move on. It's not about the people, but it's about what they do.
Wow.
Do you paint that stuff?
No, I never really paint about space or, Japanese culture. I do paint a little bit. Space is just something I like to watch, and I'm very fascinating by it. If things were normal, I definitely was gonna go into some kind of sciences. I didn't know which science I wanted because I kind of loved all types of science, but I was gonna definitely go into something.
I see that in the art sometimes. There's chemical structures or floating molecules.
Yeah, because it always brings my curiosity up to the surface, like the chemical structure of a drug that I'm taking now. I'm taking Oxbryta, and it's a new drug, but I don't know the language or the chemicals or have the education, but I know somebody had gone through that path and they figured it out. So to me, those are puzzles. And those are puzzles being solved by human beings. And I feel like I'm a Black man, and I'm growing up in a community who had very, very disheartened or setback in a way that they feel like negatively towards education. Like, you a nerd, you this thing. So I was always a nerd to my friends. I wasn't hip, I wasn't all that, because I was this guy who was getting straight A's in my science class. If I wasn't sick, I was an honor roll student all the time. So it was always something that I took, a little negative, because I felt like these guys were looking at me like, I'm better than them. But I didn't feel that way. I just felt like I'm hungry for education. I'm hungry for that language. These people are speaking a language you don't know. Learn it so you can do something for your community. I had these dreams, like there's a doctor in Nigeria who's going to cure sickle cell. He's going to be the one. But what I find in my folks are, they're very spiritual. They believe in other things. They want to heal in the natural ways. But I love science, that other language. That other language is solving a lot of things. And I want us to have the keys to these languages, these solutions.
Cheat Codes is brought to you today by Global Blood Therapeutics. GBT is a biopharmaceutical company committed to discovering, developing, and delivering life-changing treatments that provide hope to underserved patient communities, including sickle cell disease. GBT is grounded by a mission-driven culture and built with a team of experienced and passionate people committed to making a difference in the communities it serves. Cheat Codes is grateful to GBT for supporting today's episode and for serving the sickle cell community.
Let me ask you a profound question. There's a lot of us who are really dedicated to the cause and we really want to make things better. I'm talking about doctors. What are we doing wrong? I always feel like we're not meeting the patients where the patients are. Like, I just feel like it feels like we live in, we have this common goal, but I just feel like we are stuck in this patient versus doctor relationship. I want to move towards patient and doctor.
This is where I'm getting at. It's the language, right? The education and the language creates a barrier. To understand a doctor, to understand what they had to go through to become one, is going to make the language easier. You're thinking in a way that I'm not thinking. Say, I never got inspired to like science in class, or never got inspired to like any kind of medical thing. All I want to do is, I know I'm sick. I just want to come in, get my pills, go back and go do normal things. I don't want to think about sickle cell. I don't want to advocate for sickle cell. I don't want to hear any of that. I just want a normal life. That's where that mind is, right? But if you're thinking about education, you're thinking about different languages, you're trying to bridge a gap. See, you're trying to bridge a gap, but the person who is sick also needs to do a lot of work to try to bridge the gap, to meet halfway, you know? So for me, I take it upon myself where I feel like I have a lot to carry, a lot of responsibility to carry. I feel like we have to look at ourselves, and we have to look at ourselves as a community and take on some of the responsibility, because all of it is on us. We don't want these doctors to feel responsible to take care of us well. That's what I'm saying about, being inspired. Why are not the people who come at me, who's going to treat me, why do they not look like me? Why do they not come from my community? Because they would understand my troubles easier. If they came from the same block I came from, and they went to medical school, and they got back to this community and they giving back, we wouldn't have this us versus them mentality all the time, because people are making a big deal out of an illusion. It is the disparity between access to education, access to a lot of things, the racial divide, everything that has to do with what people of color has to go through. It creates a lot of distrust. It creates this whole valley of destruction in its wake. So people who have sickle cell, if we are mostly from this community, we are going to be part of this divide. And it's a sad thing to think about, because I get sad about it. It's not an easy thing to fix. When you distrust someone, and if you really start having really hate in your heart because you see a cop shot a person that looks like you, and that's all over the news, and then you're gonna go in for your pills, you go to the pharmacy, they turn you back because they don't trust you, they don't feel like you really need these pills, everything makes a mess. For you to want to fix that, it's a very, very difficult thing. It's more about us as a community healing from everything that we are dealing with, to be able to get beyond that, because we have to meet you guys halfway too. We have to understand, that you guys may not have read about sickle cell, but now we're trying harder to get that information to doctors to have that education. So it's not an excuse anymore, because we've been fighting for that for a long time. So we want the patients, the community they come from, to also learn the language of not only the language, but what is the process to get to become a nurse, to become a person who's at that job doing that work, because they need to kind of understand too, because compassion and empathy goes both ways. That's how I feel about it. We can't always ask for empathy coming from the doctor or the nurse. It has to be both ways, or it won't work at all. I can put blame on you guys all the time, because I've seen what you guys done to me, but I don't carry that. When I see Dr. Z doing all this work, I'm like, wow, man, this man is like, he's a hero to me. Everybody who has touched my life in a positive way. One of my best friends is Randy. That's my nurse. He's the guy who did my phoresis for about 8 years now, 10 years, until I stopped recently. These people are my heroes. These people saved my life. These people touched my life in a positive way. We have to carry that in our hearts as people who have a disease. We have to carry those people who help us in our hearts, because it's so easy when somebody does a dirty thing to you, or a negative thing. Hate is so easy. Holding on that anger and frustration is so easy. Learning to love someone and caring that person, and saying, this person really helped me when I really needed it. That's we take that for granted. Normally we take that for granted. We carry that hate more, and it's more motivational to have people hate. That's why Trump won. you know those people, hate is easy. You can move the world with hate, but love is harder. People are shy away from that. I don't have any answers. I just philosophy. That's just it's just deep stuff.
No, man, that's why we wanted you on, because like I said, this is what people need to hear. I mean, doctors need to hear this. Other warriors need to hear this. I mean, warriors know about you. Warriors hear from you. You talk to them, you interface with them. You're connected as a community. But I wish I could have every doctor in the world have a 30-minute session with Hertz Nazaire to talk about sickle cell disease, and they would learn more from you than they would from the textbook.
It's every human being's responsibility to speak on an issue and try to feel the issue. It's not something that I want to do. There's so many other things I would love to do, right now at the moment. But I find, like I just told a friend of mine, just speaking to her and knowing that she just got her son cured by donating her own bone marrow to her son. And now her son has the trait and everything went well. I'm like, that's a progress, But there's so much fear into those things that you go through as a parent. So talking to her and knowing that she just went through this, and I'm feeling like, man, I'm feeling so negative and gloomy today because the sun is not out and all that kind of stuff. But I said, I gotta do this podcast, and I'm like, that's important because every time you interact with the community in any way, it's always helpful, to be one person out there. The only thing that I don't like about advocacy is everybody sometimes think that they take the anger that they felt inside or the frustration that they felt inside, and they think that they are qualified to talk for the whole community. And I'm not qualified to talk for the whole community. I want to say that loud and clear. I'm not. I'm only qualified to speak on my experience and my experience alone. My art doesn't speak for the whole community. It only speaks for my experience alone. It's only when people agree with my experience or they feel inspired by my experience, that's when my voice speaks. That's when my voice matters, is when people can find something they can agree on. I have trouble with the folks that feel like they know it all and they have all the solutions in the world and they just make things harder for the rest of us. So I don't advocate people to be like me or think that they can make a difference, because I always take a step back and say, no, you can speak until you're hoarse in the throat, until you lose your voice. Nothing might change. I don't put myself too high because I feel like things I fought for really hard 20 years ago, they're still happening.
Wow. So, Hertz, Dr. Mike asked you about the moment when you felt like you were maybe becoming an artist as opposed to someone who just enjoyed art. I have the same question for you, but about sickle cell disease. When did it become real for you? Do you remember when you recognized, wow, this is real. This is something that this is going to be a problem for me? When did that, how young were you when you recognized that?
It started really early on. My main thing when I was in Haiti was knowing that I only had one job: go to school and learn. And Haiti was kind of strict with the way they learn. I didn't want to be punished in any way. There was, punishment. I hated that kind of stuff. I'm like, you want a child to learn, you shouldn't be trying to punish them or beat them up or anything like that to get them to learn something. So I always push myself with the memorizing of timetables and all that kind of stuff and make sure that my grades were always high. But there was a competition set in there. So if there was 26 kids, you were ranked from 1 to 26. And when you took your report card back home, it would have that rank on it. Not just your grades, it would have your rank, how you did on the test, how you did in class. So if you were number 26, people at back home wouldn't be happy with you. So I was always ranked number 1. When I got sick, I plummeted down to 15. And that's when I started realizing sickle cell is going to impact my life in a significant way. No matter how much my brain can work, no matter how much, I can solve with my own mind, my body is going to cause me trouble. That's when I started learning that. And I was like 6, 7 years old when I first learned that yeah, this is going to be an issue. The same way that school judges me is the same way my employers, the same way that if I got sick for 2 weeks, they start cutting my hours until I had to quit because I can't make any headway. So all of that told me I was prepared for that very early.
Wow. Along the way, Hertz, as far as dealing with your sickle cell disease, besides your art, what have you felt like was important for you in dealing with sickle cell disease? Was there anything else you could lean on? Were there other things that made it better?
Not really, because what most folks probably don't understand is that when we're dealing with sickle cell, okay, this is one person dealing with sickle cell. So that depends on your background. What is my background? Who are my parents? Are they middle class? Are they living in a nice neighborhood? Or are they living in a housing area or, with poverty all around? I've been through all of it. I grew up in a third world country. Then I moved to the United States. I've seen a lot of riches. And my stepfather, who married my mom, was a Clairol executive. Clairol is like this shampoo kind of company. He was an executive. So he, Haitian, but he was wearing a suit all the time, had a BMW. So we moved on to, he owned houses. So we moved to a neighborhood where I went to a school. I was one of three black kids in the whole school. Everybody else was white. And my best friend, his father had one of those fancy Lamborghini cars, So it was like a very high class neighborhood. Then my mom died. I moved to Stanford, lived with my godmother, and I'm living in housing, and there's drug dealers next door, having to fight bullies every other day. So whole different life. So when you think about sickle cell, people need to realize the person and their background and what they have to deal with every day matters. Like if they have a stable home and they have people who are always having their back, people who care about them deeply and want them to do better, want them to succeed, or if they're dealing with the natural consequences of living in an area that's not, suitable for human life, that they have to fight every day just to get by. They're not only fighting sickle cell, they have to walk down these streets and survive. And this is what our community has to come to terms with. And this is what the doctors need to understand. When we walk in, you need to know our background to understand why we're giving you attitude or why we're acting in such a way. Because sometimes if you don't have this mean stare, this tough guy look, and you're smiling, you're going to get your ass kicked walking down some streets. It's just real like that for some areas that you live in. You have to learn how to use the language. You have to learn how to change your language into something else. Like I'm speaking to you, I'm not using any of those words that I would have to use if I'm walking down that street, knowing the lingo and understanding how not to get yourself into a situation that's deadly for you, how to survive. And this is America. That's all it is. It's the truth about America. It's the truth about what it is. There's so many parts of life that you can learn from, but the only thing that matters is for people to understand outside of sickle cell, you're just another human being trying to survive. It's either you have a background that's upper middle class or in poverty or in a third world country with no access to anything.
Hertz, if you could talk to the 6-7-year-old version of you now, after having lived through the last, 4 or so decades, what would you tell that version of yourself?
I don't know if I wanted to influence him in any kind of way.
Would you warn him? Would you inspire him? Would you be hopeful?
One of those things about the paradox of time travel or all these sci-fi things is that
you're a science person. You just told me.
Right. I thought about it. I've thought about all these things. And one of the things that I really buy into sometimes is the many worlds theory. Like when you make a decision, you split off and that creates another universe where that decision is different. I think this is just my path is just one path, one possibility that happens. So if I went back and I told myself something, my life could completely be different, completely be different. I fantasize about, man, I should have stayed in Haiti. It would have been so good because the food is better. But the thing is, when I got sick in Haiti, there's no aspirin. The kids are dying very early on and they're not making it. I'm talking about right now.
You go back and visit?
I haven't gone back since 1986 when I first met my father, my biological father. I had to go back to meet him because my stepfather, he didn't want to be bothered, with me because he didn't feel like, it was a whole bad issue there. So my mom sent me back to meet my actual father and I met him, So I went back for that, but that was December 1986, So I've never gone back, but I've always kept in touch with Haiti. I've always kept my Haitian Creole in check. I had one of the first Haitian websites on the internet. That's something I'm proud of because I was the first, like one of the first, like at the same moment, the same month, this other guy from Miami launched his website. That was the same time I launched my website. My website was Creole.com. It was about learning Creole and keeping Creole in check. So I had to keep my language, I had to keep my language and not forget it. But I've never gone back because I felt like going back would break my heart because I would never want to come back to the United States. I would just stay, even though it would be like a death sentence for me to go to Haiti right now because I would not be able to survive. But I feel like I wouldn't want to leave.
Wow. What is the concept of sickle cell disease in Haiti? I wonder about what the stigma is. There stigma associated with sickle cell disease in the Haitian community?
I think there's stigma with everything that kind of the disease that you could have. I'm not like an expert. I can tell you some of the stories in my experience. My experience growing up is like this. Now, this is 1973, so you have to like 70s, 80s. So in Haiti early on, when they learned that I had sickle cell, they learned at 6 months old. There were actual doctors from the United States that were there that were testing for sickle cell at that time. So I knew, even in Haiti, at 6 months old, that I had sickle cell. But the belief around the family, the extended family, the friends, everything, voodoo, you are cursed. They had this supernatural explanation for it. It wasn't about science. You just took me to the hospital. Doctors tested my blood. You found out there's a name for it, anémie falciforme in Haitian Creole or in French. You know a name for it, but there was still this stigma of you are cursed. It was a voodoo thing. It's your mom, it's your dad or your grandfather. And it carried a lot of weight because you're going through a lot of pain and people are thinking, your family did something wrong to somebody and this is revenge.
That probably sticks with you, man, as a kid. Hearing that kind of stuff, that probably sticks with you.
It does. And later on, I had this really nice Haitian girl I met in the library. And she was sitting next to me and she was surfing the internet and I was surfing my website. And I showed her my website because she looked Haitian to me.
Did that work?
Yeah, it worked for a little while. So she was like, emailing me for like 7 years, but she was very religious. So she didn't want to mess with me. But after a while, 7 years later, we started dating. It became a thing where her uncle is in Haiti and he was seeing a lot of children with sickle cell dying. So he told his sister, her mother, that this man has no future. He's going to die on her. You shouldn't allow her to marry this man. And it became a really, really bad situation where she had to choose between me and her family. And I'm like, no, you shouldn't be, choosing. It just made a mess, So it created a real bad experience where it's heartbreak type things, where you feel like you are rejected because of what you have. And people don't understand that I survived all this time, You know, I can die by walking down the street. You know, there's so many other deaths I could face. Sickle cell is not the only thing I face. You know, when I turned 16, I had my first car. It was like this Honda CRX, and you know, but it wasn't drug money. It was money from my mom dying. It was money that I had, you know, and it wasn't, but I had to have a car. So I was happy to have a car. But driving in my neighborhood, shiny car, just washed it, it's an older model, but it was nice. I like the little speed in it. So I was cruising up Connecticut Avenue in Stamford, and I got surrounded by police vehicles, and their guns were drawn. And
no way.
Yeah, I mean, it was like that. And I'm like, I'm seeing this stuff now. I'm like, that's not new, that's not new at all. And it's just that there's so many ways to die. So I felt like it's not fair for people to just point at sickle cell and say, you don't give this person a chance. You don't love this person. Relationships have been really, really difficult, to get into because of that situation. That's what Haiti and sickle cell means to me, because that's the kind of experience that I have. Because of the kids dying, people have that mentality where your life has no future. And that's sad for a person to think that. Like, I'm not a suitable husband for their family member.
Oh man, Hertz, you are just.
I am a depressing person.
No, not at all, dude.
I talk about sad things, man.
No, man, no. You're real, and you're authentic, right? And it's not easy to get that. It's not easy to get that type of authenticity.
I think there's just a lot of stories, I've gone through a lot because I've sought a lot of paths. I've sought knowledge from a lot of different things. When people, pushed me on religion or anything like that, I threw myself into it. I've been places, I've traveled, and I tried new experiences. Sometimes your heart breaks because you tried something new, it didn't work out. Knowing that you are open to new experiences is something that helps you communicate, because I think one of the things that would help my community more is if they would travel more, go outside of the United States, go somewhere. I think the first time I set foot in India, it changed my life completely. Because before I was so upset that I'm on food stamps and I'm living in poverty and I'm living. Then I went to India and I saw the real deal. I'm like, wait, why does this look like Haiti? This is perfect. This is great. I'm like, this is Haiti to me. I'm like looking at it and I'm like, wow, the dirt streets. And I'm like, then there's different parts. With buildings and everything like that. But you saw real life, man. It's right in your face. And I think we take this stuff for granted in the United States, where we don't understand how good we have it. We don't understand this stuff. I think a lot of people who hear about countries in Africa, like Ghana, Nigeria, and the sickle cell communities there, they don't understand how long it would take for a pill like I'm having now, Oxybrita, to get to a place in Nigeria, to get to a place, in Ghana, to get to these little communities. And sickle cell is it's a vastly more populated, like they have millions of warriors, and millions more of people with the trait. And that's a big, huge problem.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely true, man. We sometimes neglect the warriors that are unfortunately born in the wrong place.
Yeah, this is the thing that I think people need to learn too, is that you don't choose where you are born. You don't choose who you are born. That's why I find it so difficult to hate easily, like to set myself against another group of people. I'm like, hey, I could have been born in Iraq. Why do I need to go there and bomb people? I could have been born over there and I could have seen everybody else as terrorists. Those people who we see as evildoers, they see us as the enemy because we are bombing them. Can you imagine not having a choice of where you are born and you are born there? what you're gonna look at Americans as? I'm gonna look at you as the most wicked place because you took away my mom or my dad. And we don't think about the other side. And that's one of those bridging the gaps type of thing.
Yeah. Perspective, right? It's all about perspective.
Try to see yourself in that other person's life.
You know, one thing that you said to me that always sticks with me. First of all, I got to say, man, I don't think you recognize how much of an impact you've had on me. But one of the things that you said to me that I hang on to is you said it's important to hold on to hope. We had a conversation about the word hope. And I guess as we finish up this conversation, what are you holding on to right now? What is it that you are, what is powering you? And what are you looking forward to? And what is it that's bringing you hope in the moment about sickle cell disease?
If you asked me this a couple months ago, I probably would think I'm going to die tomorrow, because I was going through some stuff with, I had this blood clot. It was causing me to pass out, to have some real serious issues. I didn't really think I was going to make it through certain things because I couldn't even walk 2 steps, and get somewhere. So I felt really down on myself for a while. And it's just difficult to know what life is sometimes. But then I realized I can fight through most of these things. I've been there before and I can continue to fight through it. Knowing that it's winter time and the weather was 70 degrees, then it was down to 40, then it was 70. And I'm looking at my Facebook and I'm seeing a new stream of warriors who are fighting for their lives in the hospital. And I'm on this new medication and it's not causing me that issue. I'm not feeling the aches when the temperature drops or raises, I'm not feeling those type of things. So I'm feeling like there are things out there that can make your life better if you can only hold on and seek for those things. And that's what hope is to me, is that even though you may think everybody's against you or this thing is going to take you out, there are still ways you can win. There are still opportunities to win. And there are still people out here who are fighting every day just to make sure that you have those opportunities. So I just feel like, if we can only become one of those people for somebody else, it's worth it to fight on another day.
That is amazing. Once again, thank you for your time today, Hertz. Thank you for your inspiration.
I appreciate it.
I appreciate your presence in my life, and I'm honored to be able to call you a friend. So thank you for all you do.
It really was great to have you on the episode, Hertz.
Yeah, thank you.
Hey, warriors and listeners, producer Patrick again. I hope that listening to that discussion was meaningful for you. Maybe even a little bit healing. Before we sign off, we do have one last bit of special audio to share with you. In 2019, as you may know, Dr. Zaidi gave a TEDx talk titled Sickle Cell Disease, A Battle for Equality, Justice, and Respect. Wanting to make the most of the opportunity to reach people and make them care about sickle cell, and wanting to authentically present on behalf of people living with sickle cell disease, Dr. Z reached out to who else? Hertz Nazaire. He wanted to get Hertz's thoughts. He wanted to hear what words Hertz would come up with. And Hertz didn't send back a one-line text message or a brief email. Instead, he sent Amar a thoughtful and reflective voice memo. And now, with Amar's permission, we share with you that voice note which helped inspire the TED Talk, a TED Talk that I should mention opens with Dr. Z talking about Hertz and his art. After you're done listening, there's a link in the show notes to that TED Talk, and you'll also find a link that will take you to a page where you can donate to help bring Hertz Nazaire to his final resting place. We'll leave you now with Hertz.
Many things I fought for 20 years ago, they're still going on. And I don't know if these images have really made the impact that I wanted them to have. I didn't even know they were going to impact anyone at the time I was painting them, if I wanted to be honest. But every time you have a chance to speak, every time you have a chance to paint, you feel this huge sense of responsibility that you have to say something about the injustice that comes with living with a disease that is part of your DNA that you had no choice in having. Yet still people look at you funny. People look at you with rejection. People look at you with disbelief. People look at you as if you are lying to them about how you feel. So I don't know. What can you say in 8 minutes to change the world's mind about sickle cell? But that's my story. Just a regular person who has this disease, lost my vision, and still dream about creating art, still dream about being free from sickle cell, being cured, still dream about hanging my work at a museum, still dream about being famous enough for my voice to matter, for me to stop being invisible, or for me to stop feeling like a burden to this world. I don't like my pieces of my DNA being rejected. I don't like feeling like I don't have family. I don't like feeling like I'm different. That's what happens when you know about the science, I guess. That's what happens when you know that DNA exists. That's what happens when you know that this disease should not still be around, that it needs a solution, and there's not enough tools to make a life like mine any different. We need better quality of life. We need people to believe our pain. We need people to look beyond the ideas of opioid epidemic and see our community for what it is. We are suffering, we have pain, and we need real empathy and compassion. That's what an art's supposed to inspire in people: empathy, compassion. And that's what I would hope my art inspires in people: empathy and compassion.